The Grange, Ramsgate. The Grange in Ramsgate was the house of the Gothic revival architect Augustus Pugin. Pugin is most famous for his part in the design of the Houses of Parliament. He was born in 1812 in London and died in 1852 at the Grange. He learned drawing from his father, a draftsman who had fled to England from France at the time of the French Revolution. In 1834, Pugin converted to Roman Catholicism, which at that time was the subject of much discrimination. In 1836, he wrote the polemical book Contrasts, in which he argued for the revival of the Gothic style of building, which he regarded as synonymous with Christian architecture. He lived in Wiltshire between 1833 and 1841, making his home at Alderbury near Salisbury, in a Gothic revival style house he had built for himself called St. Mary's Grange. It was said of this house that he had not yet learned the art of combining a picturesque exterior with the comforts of an English home. After a brief spell in London, he moved to Ramsgate. He had already bought the site at West Cliff. It is thought that the site resonated with him because it was right beside the spot where St. Augustine is thought to have landed in 597 to begin his conversion of the Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. The Grange was intended to be his ideal home, built between 1843 and 1844 in the Gothic style by the builder George Myers. Pugin's second wife died in 1844, and it was only after his third marriage to Jane Nill in 1848 that it became a family home. The interior of the house was finally completed in 1850. He also built St. Augustine's Church next to the house at his own expense. After the Palace of Westminster burnt down in 1834, a competition was held to determine the design of its replacement. At that time there was a fierce debate about whether such an important public building should be built in the Gothic or the classical style. Somewhat surprisingly, it was decided that it should be built in the Gothic style. Pugin was the foremost designer in this style, but because he had converted to Catholicism, he could not submit designs in his own name. He ended up submitting designs in support of two other architects, Sir Charles Barry and James Gillespie Graham. The Barry scheme was chosen. Barry designed the overall scheme and managed the contract, but the interiors were entirely Pugin's, as was the design for the Elizabeth Tower, which we now know as Big Ben. Building began in 1840. It is said that Pugin gave the Houses of Parliament its unique character, yet it was Barry who got all the credit because of Pugin's Catholicism. His reputation also suffered greatly from the fact that John Ruskin disliked his work and ran him down in an appendix to The Stones of Venice. Nonetheless, the Grange is in many ways a pioneering house design. It is built from the inside out in the sense that the layout of the rooms was considered before the outside of the building. This is in contrast to the Georgian style that preceded it, where the exterior was all important and houses were built in crescents and terraces to look like Renaissance palaces. The design was influential in changing the course of English domestic architecture. The house is approached from the north through a door in the perimeter wall. Across a courtyard, a glazed corridor added by Edward Pugin, his eldest son, who made several other alterations to the house, leads to the front door. You then enter the main hall, which is double height. The three main rooms lead off this: the living room, dining room and library. The three main bedrooms are directly above them. Wallpaper with Pugin's motto "En avant" covers the walls. Fragments of this were found during the restoration and lovingly recreated. A corridor leads to the service wing, the tower, and the chapel. The tower is a wonderfully eccentric addition with commanding views over the Straits of Dover. Pugin died in the house in 1852 at the age of only 40 after suffering a total breakdown. He is buried in the impressive Pugin Chantry Chapel in St. Augustine's Church. The house was rescued from demolition by the Landmark Trust in 1997 and restored with grant aid, opening in 2006 as holiday accommodation. It is Grade 1 listed.